video together to show you how I how I want your AP review homework to look like. All right, so the first step you're going to do is you're going to go to the AP website, right? And on the AP website, if it's a micro exam, you'll go here. If it's macro, go to the macro section, right? Trust me, I've given FRQ test this year, so I know you all know where this site is. So you scroll down. Let's say tomorrow's assignment that's due at 8 a.m. is the 2004 free response question. We click here. We click there, right? And now we have the exam opened, and we're going to look at the question. Okay, now that we've pulled up the exam, we're going to go to the first question, and what you're going to do is you're going to try to answer all of this on your own without looking up the answer key. Obviously, we all know there's an answer key to this. The best way to prepare for the AP test if you want to do well is to do it this way. So we're going to look at the first question, and it says the product of X is creates an externality based on the graph and blah, blah, blah. So part A says, is this externality positive or negative? So when we look at the graph, we notice that our marginal social cost is greater than marginal private cost. So society is paying part of this cost. If society is paying part of the cost, that means it is a negative externality. So in part A, next to where the word explain is, we'll just write down negative. And our explanation will be marginal social cost. So we can write MSC is greater than MPC. Okay, so that's the part A. Part B says using labeling from the graph, identify the socially optimal output. Explain how you got this output. So the socially optimal point would be where marginal social benefit is equal to marginal social cost. So that would be at Q2, right? Marginal social cost, I have it circled up there up top. I'll circle it in a different color, yep. Okay, so that, we go down, we get Q, we get Q2. Socially optimal point is Q2 because it's where MSC is equal to MSB. So for part B, after the word answer, I would write Q2 and I'd write marginal social benefit, MSB is equal to MSC. All right, that's part B. Now we get to part C. It says, suppose the good is produced by a profit maximizing monopolist. Answer each of the following. Using the label from the graph, identify the unregulated output. Explain how you determined your answer. Okay, so we got to go back to how we used to do things with the monopoly, right? We went to where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, and that gave us our output. So let's go to where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. Okay, but in this case, it's marginal private cost because that's the cost to the firm. So MR is intersecting marginal private cost at Q1. So let's go up the marginal revenue curve right there, right in purple. So we go down, and that gives us Q1. Okay, so the answer to C, was that part A, is Q1. And it asks how did we get that? And we write down marginal revenue is equal to marginal private cost. So, do we indicate whether we should tax or subsidize the monopolist? Well, the monopolist is not producing enough because we said the social optimal point was Q2 and we're at Q1. So we need to get them to Q2. So we're going to have to subsidize. So the answer to the second part of C is to tax, subsidize, excuse me. So for where it says to produce the social optimal point, I'm going to write there subsidize right after the word firm. Okay, now I got to calculate the dollar value. So if I go back up to look at the graph, if I'm subsidizing, I'm making the cost curve shift to the right. So I'm taking the marginal private cost curve and I'm MPC and I'm shifting it down to where MR equals it at Q2. So if you notice it, it's at $4. So at $4, I'm going to draw a horizontal line, okay, all the way across. So I'm going to bring that all the way straight out past the demand curve, and I'm going to label it MPC2. Okay, so now if you notice, MR is equal to MPC2 at Q2, so we're at the socially optimal point. So how much of a subsidy do I have to give? We shifted it from 7 down to 4. We had to give a subsidy of $3. Okay? All right. So now we have to go to part D. Suppose X is produced in a perfectly competitive industry. Answer each of the following. Using the graph, what's the output in the absence of regulation? To explain how you determined it. So in this case, I'm going to go back and look at the graph and say if this was a perfect competitor, they would produce Q2. All right, so for part there, I would say Q2 because MSC is equal to marginal social benefit. All right, so that's what I put down for D. To produce the socially optimal output, indicate whether the government should tax or subsidize the firm in this industry. So because I picked Q2, we're at the socially optimal point, I'm going to say we're neither going to tax or subsidy. So no tax, no. So in D part 1, I'm going to write, right after the word answer, I'm going to write Q2. And then after part 2, I'm going to write, okay, firms in the industry, I'm going to write no tax or subsidy for part 2. And then for the last part, I'm going to write 0. All right, so we're done. You got to put this in Notability so you can hand it in to me. Once you put it into Notability, pull up the answer key and change whatever you did not get right. Correct your mistakes. Okay, so you should put it in blue, what you wrote, and red, the correct answers. I do not care whether they're right or wrong when you do this. I want you to expose yourself to this and try to answer without doing it. All right, so let me open up Notability, a blank thing, and I'll put down the answers in Notability. All right, so if I open up a blank Notability, okay, and I'm going to just write on here Micro 2004. All right, so A, and we're going to do this in blue ink. So A, we're going to put A, and we're going to write negative externality. marginal social cost is greater than marginal private cost. MSC greater than MPC. Okay. Now, if you want to do this and just have the sheet open in the beginning, you're more than welcome to. I just needed a notability so you can hand it in. And it has to be handwritten, no typing. Okay, so B, social optimal output, we're going to write Q2. MSB is equal to MSC. Okay, part C, Q1, MR is equal to MPC. Then we're going to write after that, on the same line, well, this is all part of C. So we're going to write, I guess we'll go down a line, and we'll write, government should grant a per unit subsidy of $3. So we're going to, government should grant a per unit subsidy of $3. Okay, and then we get to part D. Just a little spin, flipped classroom. Okay, so part D, we wrote Q1 for part 1. Excuse me, we wrote Q2. All right, so we wrote Q2 instead of Q1. Let me just erase that. Good. And we said marginal social cost is equal to marginal social benefit. So MSC is equal to MSB. Okay? And then it wanted to know about a tax or subsidy. We said neither. And we said 0. All right, so now let's stay on the notability. I'm going to open up the answer key on the side here myself, and I'm going to go through this and let's check our answers. So I pull up the answer sheet, and first answer is negative externality, MSC equals MPC. If you want, so let's change to red. So what I would do at the end of point A is I put a little check that you'd gotten that correct. Again, it's for you, not for me, okay? Then we go to B, and B is also correct. And C is correct. Okay, we get to D, and D is wrong. Okay, Q2 is not the answer. Okay, so right after where we wrote MSC equals MSB, we're going to, in red, put down the right answer. So in this case, the right answer was Q3. And the reason is you go to where the demand curve, you go to D equals MPC. All right, and that's at Q3. So that was wrong. So now that we know that's wrong, the next two are going to be wrong also. The socially optimal output was Q2. We're producing at Q3, okay, which means we're producing too much. So in order to get that to be fixed, we're going to have to tax, okay? So the answer to the next part we wrote neither is we're going to say tax. So it's going to be a per unit tax. All right. And if you go back to the graph and look, you can see, I'll just tell you where it is. You can look at it yourself later. But at the, maybe I can pull it up this way. Perfect. Okay, so if we look at Q3, where marginal private cost is equal to the demand curve, right? It's a green circle there. It's the thinner green circle. We'll just let one, right, that's good. That's the red part, right? So if we look at that, we notice that they're charging $7, but we need to be up to the green, the very thick green circle. That's where we should be. So we have to tax them at $5 to shift them up to the 12. Okay, so that's the tax, a $5 tax. All right, so we go back to notability and we write in there $5. All right, and that's it. That's question 1. Also, for this assignment, I'm not going to do it here. You would then go down to question 2. You could start a second sheet. You could do it on the right below here. You would write question 2. So below this, I'll write question 2. Okay. All right, and then I would do the same process. All right. And again, I'm not going to look at the red and go, oh, take points off. You're getting points for completing this. Okay, it's about how much you want to, how well you want to do. Okay. All right, I will go over this in class. Any questions? Any questions, whatever. All right, thank you.